Welcome back to Early Edition. Well, the Philippines is one of the most biodiverse countries in the world with an abundance of resources that provides for the livelihood of many Filipinos. But our biodiversity is also under threat due to neglect and continued exploitation. Although there are laws that protect the environment, there is still a need to conserve, preserve, and rehabilitate the country's protected areas. Now, joining us in our Rockwell studio is a staunch advocate of the environment, Senator Loren Legarda. Good morning, Senator Loren. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, TJ, and good morning to all the listeners on this early morning while we talk about the environment and the protection of our protected areas.
All right. Well, let's begin with that. When an average person hears the word protected areas, they might not be so sure what you're talking about and what you mean by this. But I guess for those out there who are hearing this for the first time, can you explain to them what is a protected area and how important really is this?
I am sure that every Filipino knows, understands, appreciates, and recognizes a protected area because they see it, they feel it, it's around them. We may not just realize that it's a protected area.
Right.
Tubataha Reef in Palawan, for example, even the Taal protected landscape, Mayon Volcano protected landscape. Would you know that the only protected area in Metro Manila is the Ninoy Aquino Parks and Wildlife? It's the only patch of green with biodiversity, flora and fauna in Metro Manila. We have more than 100 protected areas in our country. Actually, we have 240 protected areas all over the country. These are declared. Of the 240 protected areas, both marine, meaning tubig, and terrestrial, meaning land, in different provinces all over the country. There are more than 100 which have been declared by presidential proclamation and only 13 that have been legislated that completes the process. In short, there are these protected areas. When you say protected, literally, it should be protected because of the importance, because of the richness and wealth of its biodiversity. What is biodiversity? That is the flowers, the trees, the animals, the insects, the flora and fauna, and the whole ecosystem must be protected because it's important to our livelihood, to our life, to our survival. In short, the calamities that we hear about, soil erosion, denudation of our forests, people dying because the mountains actually swallow up villages. These are degradation and desecration. In short, sinisira po ang ating mga protected area, kaya tayo namamatay. And so caring and the protection of our protected areas is so important. That is why I legislated and I filed the National Integrated Protected Areas System, or the NIPAS law.
The NIPAS, yes.
Actually, way back in 1992, there are already declared NIPAS laws. We have Mount Kitanglad in Mindanao, Tubataha, I mentioned, which is one of the most beautiful dive sites, not just in the Philippines, but in the world. I can run you a list of all these protected areas. I said 240.
Yeah.
And when I say 240, it does not even take into consideration the marine protected areas which are declared locally.
Right.
Go to every municipality, in every town, in every city, in every province. The locals would tell you, protected area namin yan. Sagay, let's say in Negros Oriental, Sibalom, a natural park in my province of Antique. There's so much protected areas that need to be preserved. And the mountaineers would tell you that. Because of the birds, because of the trees, because of the mega biodiverse flora and fauna that we have there.
Aside, Senator Loren,
I can go on and on.
I know, but let's dig into this a bit more. No, aside from the obviously the tourism aspect of it, of observing the beauty of nature.
Oh, it's more than tourism.
I know exactly. So how can we stress how important this is? In terms of we really need to protect this for the future. As you said, you mentioned biodiversity, in terms of just how the ecosystem works, right? Tell us a bit more about that and how critical it is to truly take care of these protected areas.
Well, first, you're correct for tourism. And tourism means livelihood. Tourism means jobs. It's not just for tourism, however. It is for our very own survival.
Okay.
What happens if we cut a forest? What happens if the trees are just cut and you've bald mountains. Then, naturally, you see with the 20 typhoons happening every year, you see the whole mountain collapse and actually swallow up villages, which has happened many years ago, let's say in southern Leyte, and you see in Lanao del Norte, you see mud flows, you see death, and really whole mountain, because there are no more trees, the roots of the trees no longer keep the water from flowing down. Second, the Calamian deer, for example, the Palawan bear cat, for example, the tamarao of Occidental Mindoro, for example. These are very rare, endangered species that are found only in certain areas in the Philippines. And what happens when we lose this endangered species? We live in an ecosystem where we humans and animals and flora, fauna are dependent on each other's survival. And this has an impact on our ecosystem, on the food we eat, on the catch of our fisher folks, on our whole survival. And so man should not encroach into these protected areas, but there are protected areas where there could be symbiotic relationship, if that's the word, between humans and our biodiversity. And but we should care for it and not abuse it.
There you go.
And so it's so important. And there's a bureau in the Department of Environment and Natural Resources that is supposed to take care of our protected areas, and that's the BMB, the Bureau of Biodiversity. That should take care. I call them every time I remember something, I see something, I read something. Oh, I wish I could Mac.
All right.
Yeah,
now
actually, my dream is to be a superintendent of a natural park.
The passion is obviously there. All right. You touched a bit about legislation earlier. You talked about the NEPAS bill. Are you satisfied so far with the with what the legislation is out there right now, or do we need more? Or do we need to improve on it?
No, I'm not. I'm not satisfied at all, and I believe, honestly, bluntly, that Congress has been remiss in passing important legislation on protected areas. As I said, there are 240 protected areas in our country. 113 have been declared. Only 13 have been legislated. You know, TJ, that I passed on third reading an important protected areas legislation 2 Congresses ago, and it was not passed by Congress. I passed it on third reading, but the lower house didn't pass it in the previous Congress. And now we passed it again, and both houses just don't see eye to eye because there are certain areas that don't want to be part of the protected areas. It baffles me. And so, because there are sometimes vested interests that want to exploit an area that must be protected and conserved. And so it is just so important that we first conserve it and protect it, and third, allocate resources. In this year's budget, as chairman of your Committee on Finance, I've actually allocated more than 1 billion. The exact number is 1.4 billion is appropriated for the protected areas development and management nationwide. And I actually have the list here of these protected areas. They're both coastal and marine protected areas and terrestrial protected areas. It would include a forestry plan. It would include a biodiversity action plan. It also has a Coral Triangle Initiative National Action Plan. Do you know that the Philippines is one of, I think 6, if I'm not mistaken, countries within the Coral Triangle, which includes Indonesia, it includes Papua New Guinea, and even Timor-Leste. We are the center of biodiversity in the world. The Coral Triangle is the richest area in the world, and the Philippines is in the center of that.
Amazing.
And the Visayan Sea is the center of biodiversity. Imagine that. How wealthy we are, but why are our fisher folks one of the poorest populations in our country? Because all we need to do is to preserve it and conserve it and to realize its importance.
Well, you mentioned that already in terms of the people on ground. I mean, as much as Congress is not, as you said, supporting the whole endeavor enough, how important are the indigenous people on ground? I mean, if we work bottom up in terms of people on the ground who will really truly take care of this, how important is their involvement and understanding of how important it is to truly protect this and keep it for generations to come?
The indigenous peoples, at least 12 million of them, of our 100 million population, thrive on the resources of our protected areas. And I think their culture, their indigenous culture, is entwined with the beauty and the diversity of these protected areas, and they're part of us in the protection of these protected areas. I'm not saying that we from the lowlands exploit it and abuse it and the indigenous peoples protect it. Everyone is responsible in its protection, and there are violations from all sectors. But what's important, and that's the reason why I have this documentary with Brillante Mendoza in ANC, for people to see our fragile earth, for people to see the importance of protection, for people to see that we can earn by conserving and protecting, not just by ecotourism, but in alternative, supplemental, sustainable livelihoods, as long as you protect these protected areas. And so our indigenous people are an integral component of the protection of our protected areas.
All right. You touched a bit earlier on the DNR and how you like to be a ranger yourself, actually. But digging more into their role, how is the funding for these protected areas? Do they have enough people on ground? And are they coordinated well enough with LGUs? As you said, you've seen problems here and there. You pick up the phone, you make a phone call to the DNR. When it comes to that, how critical is their role and how empowered are they?
It's very important that the DNR does its job. Yes, it has competent people, it has scientists, it has technical people, but really policing and guarding all these protected areas is a real challenge. That's why it's important that we have engagement with the local community and local governments. Local government, that's so integral. We must have local governments first who realize their gem, their wealth. Not to exploit and destroy, but to take care of and earn from it, from ecotourism, from caring for it, from having these eco guides, from planting mangroves, to protecting our forests, to protecting our coral reefs, which are degraded, deteriorating, or dead. So we have so much wealth. Why are we so good at destroying what we have? So that really gets me, and that's a reason why I've allocated financial resources, more than 1.4 billion in our national budget for the protection of protected areas. I think the DNR knows this, that never has it happened. That the national government, the finance committee, has given so much resources for its own protection. I micromanage. The director of BMB knows that. I call her all the time. I even want to see the conservation centers that we allocated funds for. In fact, today, as I go to my desk at 8 o'clock, I'm going to look for the report on the protected areas. I established conservation centers in every protected area, like tourism centers, so that children, teachers, local tourists can actually go and see pictures. What is the importance of this plant? What is the importance of this animal? We can trek here and see this important landscape. Just a few weeks ago, I went to the Pandan Antique Arboretum. It's an eco park. It's beautiful. It's in my hometown of Pandan Antique, and it has different types of indigenous trees, species. It's just pretty. And in every town, there is some protected area. In Pandan Antique, they actually call it a Northwest Panay Peninsula. It's the lowest, it's the only existing low-lying forest between the provinces of Antique and Aklan. And that's where Boracay is located. I'll be very blunt, TJ. Let's not make our country and our protected areas another Boracay. We've destroyed it collectively. Maybe too much tourists, maybe lack of vision of whoever was in charge in local government, lack of supervision and monitoring and enforcement of the national government. It's everyone's collective responsibility. But perhaps all is not lost if we segregate garbage at waste, recycle, and compost. If we protect our coral reefs and do coral rehabilitation. If we even limit the number of tourists, the carrying capacity. The Kingdom of Bhutan limits its carrying capacity of tourists. We can do that.
Right.
It doesn't deprive the locals of income. All we say is that up to this point, we will accept tourists. And tourists, you can come into our kingdom of Boracay, but you must segregate garbage. And then we must have sewage, good septage and sewage. We must respect it. But what do? We throw plastics. We throw human waste. So there's coliform. There's just so much abuse. Do we want all our protected areas to end up that way, which are destroyed gems in our midst? I think it's a crime to keep on destroying what is God-given wealth to us to protect, for us to enjoy.
All right,
it's not for us to destroy because it's not ours.
Right.
It's for the next and the next generation. And we are simply stewards of the earth. And so, what are the operational guidelines in doing our protected areas, whether they are declared or not by legislation? First, implement RA 9003. Ecological solid waste management by segregating garbage at source, recycle, compost.
Very basic,
Second, we must have rainwater collectors. Third, we must plant more mangroves, plant more trees, indigenous trees. Fourth, we should prevent shooting, hunting, taking home these animals and these trees. And fifth, make every person who enters a protected area responsible for his footsteps there, for what he does in that area. I can go on and on, TJ.
Right. But this is why
really,
you did Dayao.
all of this.
Yes. It's okay. We want to jump into Dayao and your work for Fragile Earth with Brillante Mendoza. Tell us a bit about this, how you thought that this was an important step to visually show as much people as you can the beauty of what we have out there. Because it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to visually show it so they truly appreciate how beautiful it is and how in danger they are. So talk a bit about this and your experience of going around with Brillante Mendoza, with the production crew, and what you've seen so far and how important that it has been to put it on air for people to see.
Oh yes, I'm glad that we had a collaboration with the DNR, with ANC, and with Direct Brillante Mendoza, who we know is a Cannes Best Director. This 8 to 10 minute mini documentaries. Why 8 to 10? I came from television. The attention span of people, one gap we call it, no? Is 8 to 10 minutes. And we have so much footage, and my staff is here listening. I hope that we have all our raw footage because this cannot be replicated. All our raw footage should be stored. And the edited documentaries are played once, but they're replayed on ANC. And what we will do is we will actually upload it on YouTube, online, so anybody can access it. At the same time, for those who don't have internet in the provinces and the DepEd schools, we will give USBs or CDs, or in whichever format, so that our students can appreciate it. Because how can you appreciate or value something you don't know exists?
Right.
And so, while we will not prevent tourists from going, of course, it's there to be appreciated, we must make sure that it's protected and we care for it like it's our wealth. For example, those who go to Banahaw, for example, Mount Banahaw was closed for a long while. I think it's still closed because what do tourists do? They bring all these plastics, dinudumihan nila. Kailangan may kanya-kanyang dalang balot, tas you bring down your own trash. Di ba? Pag marine naman, wag tayong maninira, aapak sa corals, wag natin babasagin, ibablast yung corals, wag tayo mag-cyanide or dynamite fishing. Maraming pamamaraan eh. Ordinaryong tao, o mangingisda, o magsasaka eh. Pero hindi natin lahat ginagawa ito. And that's the reason why it's important. First, to be aware, ay, ang ganda pala. Apo Island, let's say, ang gaganda pala. Tapos sabihin nila, ay, sayang naman, pagdumihan natin. Or they see protected areas which are well conserved and they say, oh, it's beautiful. It's such a respectable people who protect the protected areas in their midst. And so I hope that everyone would watch our protected areas documentaries. I think it's being replayed all the time, every Saturday, early morning. You start your weekend at 7:45 a.m. But it's replayed.
Yes. And it's
calling
available
sila
online,
Liboro
as you
to replay it all the time,
Right.
because it's educational.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for that, for what you've done for the environment, for the documentaries you've produced with Brillante. And we want to thank you for your time this morning. At least now we're better educated and we visually see how beautiful these things that we truly have, as you said, we're blessed with, and we hope that really everybody gets on board and takes proper care of our protected areas. So, Senator
if I
Loren
may
Legarda.
add, TJ.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes. No, in terms of carbon sequestration, our forests are really very good sequesterers of carbon. In fact, the UNEP World Conservation Center estimates that it really baffles me, 312 gigatons of carbon, or 15% of the world's terrestrial carbon stock are actually stored in protected areas. I know it's hard to think in terms of gigatons, but that's how it is. I mean, there's just so much wealth, and global warming and the impacts, negative impacts of climate change can be arrested, can be mitigated by protecting our protected areas.
Absolutely, well said. Thank you so much again, Senator Loren Legarda. And for those of you who want to see exactly what it is, as you said, you can watch him on Saturday, 7:45 in the morning right here on ANC. Senator Loren, thank you so much.